All right. So this is my third take of trying to make this video. It's an unedited, multiple takes story time. And the reason I'm going to tell this story is because I don't know, I feel like it may help somebody and it may not help anyone, but if it does help somebody, great. If it doesn't help anyone, great. And it's a personal story about my own personal weight journey. And I remember talking to my wife this morning about my own personal weight journey because we were just looking back at both our journeys in terms of, you know, weight fluctuating and being healthy. And I was just explaining to her about, where my own personal weight journey started. And it goes back pretty far, actually. It goes further than one might think, or it goes further than I might think. So, I grew up as a child who was who was fat. I like using the word fat. I don't think there's anything wrong with that word. I grew up as a child who was fat. And I went to boarding school during my younger ages. And if you have like Nigerian parents, one thing that that they almost all do, not almost all of them, but almost all do, those who can afford to, one thing that they all do is send you to boarding school if they feel you need to lose weight. And there's other reasons why they send you to boarding school, but one of the main reasons why is because in boarding school, you have structure that you wouldn't necessarily have at home unless your parents are willing to put the structure in. And I felt like my thought is that my parents were saying to themselves, let's send this child to boarding school so he can learn some structure in his life that will aid him. And I went to boarding school from the ages of 10 till probably the age, how old was I when I left boarding school? Probably 19 years old. So from age 10 to age 17, 10 to 17, yeah, 10 to 17, 16, roughly, I was in boarding school in Nigeria, and I had become this child that was once fat to this kid that was now no longer fat and able to jump and basically dunk a basketball on a good day. And I went back home one summer before I was starting boarding school out here in the US. And that summer, I had been like, oh yeah, I'm about to be back in the US. I'm about to be out in the US for school. Things are going to be great. I'm healthier than ever. And while I was at home that summer, I lost all my discipline. Every single bit of it. Every single bit of it was gone. It was no longer go to bed at this time, no longer wake up at this time. All the things that I had grown accustomed to love in boarding school that people had forced upon me, right, were no longer forced upon me. And I had become this individual who was like eating late at night, and I had my phone in my hand all the time again because I didn't have my phone in boarding school. You would leave your phone back at home, which is awfully strange for people who grow up here in America to understand. So I didn't have my phone with me, and I would be up all night on Instagram or Snapchat, texting people, God knows what, about nothing in the middle of the night. And all like I said, all my discipline had gone out the way. And those 3 months of being back at home without discipline, without someone telling me, like, no, this is your bedtime, without not having my phone, I gained an astronomical amount of weight back. I had probably gone from like someone who was, yeah, like I said, someone who was skinny, light, and agile to someone who was on the heavier side. Now, this is when I would say heavier side, as opposed to fat. Who was on the heavier side, and you know, not able to, take care of maintain their health, right? And I came to boarding school out here in the U.S. probably at the end of that summer. I remember the day, probably August 28th. August 28th. And my first day of boarding school, I was like, oh, I'm about to be in school in the US. I'm going to play some basketball, and things are going to be great. And here's the interesting thing: there was a large disconnect between me, the individual in the head, and my body, because the individual in the head had created this body that was fit and active and ready to go. But the disconnect was that over the summer, I had basically destroyed this body that was fit, ready, and active. Fit, ready, fit, active, and ready to go. I destroyed it because I was eating without any bit of any restriction, no restriction whatsoever. I was just eating whatever I wanted to eat because you're at home. You graduated boarding school in Nigeria, and your parents want you to be happy, which is fine because all parents do. And while I was back home, while I'd come here, I when I started the semester, I would talk to people about like, yeah, I'm about to play basketball. It's gonna be great. And I was like, yeah. I was telling them like, yeah, I'm pretty good. We're gonna be fine. And then we went into the school year, and I was on the heavier side. I just realized like for the basketball tryouts, I was so out of shape, like extremely out of shape, and it was this was when the full disconnect in like who the person in the head and like the body was, like what the hell is happening. So I couldn't play basketball anymore. That got taken away from me because I eventually was I didn't make varsity. I was just eventually was like I did JV, and I was like, you know what, I'm not doing this. I'm just gonna do something else. And I just stopped. I just like was like fuck it. And probably later on that fall, football season started, and I already had a spot on the football team because I did make the tryouts for that to be part of lineman. And even though I didn't love it, it was like, okay, at least there's another sport to do right here. And we got into football, started doing more workouts, more of the drills. I was lazier at that point in time, but throughout the workouts and the drills, I became more and more lazy again, and I became more and more myself, and I started losing weight again, and I was like, oh, that's great, like we're dropping down in weight. But the problem with that was that in football they needed me to be bigger. So I was like, I don't like getting weight right now, so it's not going to work out in terms of me getting bigger. And because by the end of the football season, we're done. It wasn't like anything special, but we're done like okay for a small school team. And I basically like kept going on with this like losing of weight thing into like the winter season. I joined the track team, but I wasn't running. I was just doing a lot of the discus and javelin and all the other throwing sports. But it was keeping me fit, kept me going, and I just kept going. Fast forward to next summer, where I essentially gained all the weight back again. Like everything was up again. Every single thing was up again. I was up again in weight. I was up again in size. I was up again in like heart, inability to run. And we were back to square one. Basically, without making the story longer than it needs to be, or without making the story more boring, I kept this cycle going where I would lose weight, come back up in weight, lose weight, come back up in weight, lose weight, come back up in weight. And that happened up until I got to college. My first year of college um, was in Jacksonville, Florida. And I didn't like school in Jacksonville. I was not very much a fan of Jacksonville. I didn't like the environment around me. But the isolation, I was isolated away from everyone and everything I knew again. And it was new beginnings again. And while in Jacksonville, I didn't have the best food options, but I decided, regardless of whatever was going on, I was going to take my weight seriously again. And I was going to lose weight again, like lose all of it again. I spent the better half of my time in Jacksonville waking up in the morning, going to class, and then after class, just going to get a workout in, regardless of whoever wanted to join me or who didn't want to join me. And this was from the summer of 2019 up until the fall of 2020. And not fall 20, summer of 2019. Yeah, summer of 2019 up until spring of 2020, when we found out about the pandemic and we all had to go back home. So I had lost all this weight going into the pandemic, but I'd come back home I was back home with my uncle and aunt in New Jersey, and in a house full of food, house full of people just staying at home and eating. And I mold again. I adapt everyone's way of doing things, and I gained all this weight, up again in weight in 2020. And this time it was very bad because I had come back from probably, I was probably like 245 in pounds, and 245 pounds, and I had gone up all the way to like 273, 278 pounds. Like honestly, I hit 280 pounds around the end of the pandemic, which is not good. So the pandemic ends, crazy couple months, feels like years, but crazy couple months. And I moved to NYC because I transferred out of Jacksonville to come school in New York. And while I'm schooling out here in New York, I'm basically saying to myself again that I'm going to lose all this weight that I've gained over the pandemic. And I slowly start by walking through NYC, discovering the city, discovering what's going on, where's where, and through walking and basically taking solo bike rides around New York, solo bike rides around New York, I start to slowly bring this weight down. And once again, like isolation, the isolation and not being around everybody that you know and everything that you know forced me to develop my own schedule, my own way of doing things. And eventually I'm able to get back on this weight loss journey and heading back down in weight. And yeah, it's good. For me, I was really, really happy in the fact that I finally lost the weight again. And I thought this was the end of it all. This was like the last of doing any of this like weight gain stuff. It wasn't the last. I wish it were the last, but it was not the last. But I have to fast forward probably a year after getting married, or maybe 2 years. No, not even a year after getting married. Right? Is it a year after getting married that I gained this weight? No, it's not the year after getting married. No. The year I got married, right? That summer, I lost so much weight and I was like the prime of my athletics personally, because every single day in New York, I basically would wake up in the morning, go work out, then be done with that working out, maybe read, watch a couple podcast videos, and then go out in the afternoon, probably like 1 p.m., from like 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., 4 p.m., play basketball on any court I would like to play in the city, just whether it's West Side Court or Tompkins or what's it called? What's the other place by like the Whole Foods in the village? I just play basketball wherever I could, just sweat under the sun and like just get like my nerves cooking. And I was top shape. I was like healthy as I could be, and but I was out of school that year, so it continued because I had my schedule, my own personal schedule that I set up, and I go back into school after taking a year off, and this time school is running on full scale. It's no longer this thing that was happening during the pandemic where everybody is on Zoom and they wake up in the morning and just get on the camera. School is like you have to come back in person, and all classes and all tests are in person. And I mold my life to fit the school schedule again. And that takes away all my discipline, takes it all away, because the assignments are too much. The the mixed with like a bunch of other personal issues I was having around that time in life that I won't get into right now. All of it was too much because I had become this person that had created this really structured schedule that I could hold myself accountable to. And I was really good at it. I was really good at following my schedule. Regardless of whatever was happening in the world, I could follow my schedule. I would wake up in the morning every day, 5 a.m., run, and and then come back, stretch, learn some yoga. Like I was just like going in like terms of improving myself as an individual. And getting back into school, cause I was out while I was out of school for a year. I call it I call it a blessing in disguise because I really wanted to. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I part of me wanted to go back straight to school and just be like, yeah, I'm learning. I'm gonna finish this engineering degree, and then that's it, done with school. But another part of me was really coming alive. This person that could hold themselves together, who could like build the world that they wanted to live in, who could like create their own boundaries by themselves, who could say no to things. And it's very hard for people to say no to things, I've come to discover. And it's become so easy for me to say no because I can tell myself no. And many people cannot tell themselves no, so they find it hard to tell others no. So I get back into school, and I realized this thing about schedules because I tried to create first I create a schedule because while I was out of school for a year, I had a schedule, and then I create a schedule in school that tries to merge the world that I lived in while I was out of school with the world I lived in while I was in school. And I realized that this wasn't working. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give more time to school because that's what I'm trading. Like I'm trading a lot of my time to studying and school. And then I realized like, oh, this work and homework and all this stuff is not flowing as well with me right now because school is eating up all my time. I'm constantly and I get to this point where it's like I have to make a decision, and it's not a decision that I'm happy to make because I no longer, but I was an international student at that point in time. And as an international student, you can't be part time in school. You can only be full time. And the option was not there for me to go part time. The option was either you leave this thing right now and you come back later, or you stay with it, and you sacrifice your health again. And I couldn't sacrifice my health anymore. It was a very tough decision in that way because I was very happy with the individual I was becoming, and I was very unhappy with the individual school was making me. Not because like I wasn't learning or anything. Well, that was happening too. I really wasn't learning. I was just doing homework. But mostly because the individual I was becoming could hold themselves accountable and could say no. Versus the individual that school was building didn't feel like they had time for themselves. They didn't feel like they had time for anything important. Even when I would restrict myself and say no to all my friends and be like, I can't hang out with you guys. You guys have to do this thing. You guys can do your thing. I just have to like focus on like my schoolwork right now. And I got into school at a nice weight, probably around 230 pounds, 235, lean muscle mass, 235. And my last semester there was, I left at 278 pounds. I was not happy. I was not. I was just like, I cannot keep doing this because the stress of all of this stuff is not worth it. And I don't, it's not so much more, it's not an excuse for people to be like, yeah, this is why school is useless. I don't think that's what I'm trying to get at. I was quite, I was in an engineering degree, so there's a lot to commit to when you go to school for engineering. But having to do it without the option of being part-time was not something that someone like I could do at that stage. Because in the previous stage, what I could do was like I would say I'm ignoring everything and I'm gonna focus on this, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't, you know, say to myself I'm gonna ignore my health and I'm going to focus on this right now. And I leave school probably earlier this year, and I get into the summer, and my body, like my unconscious mind, I don't even know how it knows this, because I built this thing. My unconscious mind basically reverts back to the person I am today, where I'm reading more books externally. Like I'm actually like sorting out books to read. I have like a long reading list, and I'm working out every day without questioning it. It's just naturally happening. I'm waking up every morning 4 a.m. regardless of what's going on. Like I'm up at 4 a.m. Some mornings my body does try to trick me into like, let's sleep longer. But even if it says let's sleep longer, I still don't wake up later than 5 on the dot. Like 5 a.m. is the latest I wake up in the morning, which is sometimes a crazy thing to think about. When I even consider at some point in time during the pandemic, I used to wake up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon and just be up all night long doing God knows what. And I don't know. It's one of those things that I would like people to think about, really, like really think about your health and really think about what it means to be a healthy individual, and like the sacrifices you probably have to make to keep your health going. Because right now, I feel like I'm getting back to that prime health stage where I'm I'm roughly in the two, like I said, in May I was probably 273, 275, or 278 pounds, 273, 275 pounds. And now I'm back 245 pounds, probably by the end of the year. Because right now it's October. By the end of the year, I expect to be back to 240, 238 pounds, just like lean muscle mass again. And all of this just to say is like your health is not a joke. Like there's a lot of things in life that people tell you to do, and they will encourage you to do these things because they know no better. People know no better. They don't know better about these things, and you feel that deep down inside of you, you can achieve way more if you do things this way versus the way they're telling you to do things. And I don't know, I just want to encourage people to think about their health. Like, really think about your health. And when you think about your health, think about what you're sacrificing. Because if you're sacrificing your time, the time to stay healthy, based on like stressful factors that you feel, may give you like temporary like relief in life, it's you may feel it's worth it. I personally don't feel it's worth it. And that's a personal opinion. And we can have a difference of opinion. And that's fine. But that's a personal opinion. Because this version of me at age 23 right now, about to turn 24 in a couple months, this person can sustain this health for the next 40, 50 years. Can you sustain your current health for 40, 50 years? What's going to happen is that you're probably going to end up on the side where you're either working yourself to death for money, and they keep you in the rat race of like, oh, your job, then you get paid, then you feel so tired you can't do anything, or your school, then you get school's a funny one because education has never been cheaper. $20 for ChatGPT, and you buy a textbook. I'm dead ass, but education has never been cheaper. I don't know if people know that, yes, but that might be ahead of its time in terms of like this idea of $20 for ChatGPT, and you just buy textbooks or any book you want to read and just build your knowledge. Education has never been cheaper, but we really have a chance to like take care of our health. And the older you get, the most valuable thing you're going to find out is that health is important. Like, you're going to find out how much you would love to trade your 35-year-old self who has a stable job for something that has stable income. You would like to trade that 35-year-old like unhealthy body for someone with like a healthy body and a stable amount of money too. And I'm not saying that it's either or, where it's like somebody who takes care of their health cannot earn so much, or someone who earns so much cannot take care of their health. But I'm trying to encourage people to take care of their health because life is a marathon, and you have to understand that this is a long distance thing, and one of the only things you will have throughout your entire life until the day you die is your body. And if your body is not optimal, you're not going to be able to do much of anything except, maybe be able to do some other things, but yeah, you just want to enjoy it. That's all. Everybody, everybody undervalues health, in my opinion. Yeah, well, this rant. It's been like 28 minutes now. I don't even know how I spent the last 28 minutes talking in front of this camera. And I don't even know if this rant makes sense to anyone. It might just feel like a rant in general. But take care of your health. Take care of yourself. Love yourself. And please, please, please take care of your health. Stay away from Ozempic.